Larry King, the hell with you. This is TWI, Troy Wilde Interviews. Charlie Rose, what are you, like 83? The hell with you. This is TWI, Troy Wilde Interviews. Piers Morgan, you, sir, are a moron. This is TWI, Troy Wilde Interviews.
And thank you so much, and welcome to episode 21, as they say in Spanish, 21, in French, 21, of Troy Wilde Interviews, the broadcast quality podcast dedicated to interviewing comics in the United States and around the world. We are available on iTunes, now called Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher Radio, YouTube, and of course, our website at troywilde.com. Today, from Singapore, Jinx Yeo. Jinx Yeo, comic, touring Southeast Asia, Australia, Europe, the UK. Jinx Yeo is spelled Jinxyeo. Take that at .com and you have his website, jinxyeo.com. Jinx is a guy who is a comic traveling in Asia. I'm looking at his touring schedule. Hong Kong in July, Jakarta, Indonesia in July, Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, just across the border from Singapore, also in July. Then he's playing Edinburgh Fringe, the largest comedy and arts festival in the world. That is throughout the month of August. Jinx recently wrapped up a month-long gig at the Melbourne International Comedy Festival. My brain went dead there for a moment, like straight line, just dead. I don't know what happened there. I was like, you know, like when the EKG thing, just straight lines. That's what happened to me in that 3-second interval while I was trying to remember. Happened again. I keep wanting to say Monterey. No, Melbourne International Comedy Festival. That's where we kind of connected with Jinx. He's in Singapore. And Singapore, I didn't know much about it. I knew that it was, you know, kind of a rockin' modern place. Is a city-state that borders Malaysia in far Southeast Asia. And Jinx, my friends, has a pair of balls. I am self-aware that I am a coward in many areas of life, specifically when it comes to doing stand-up, because I'm afraid I'm going to bomb like everybody. I get up there and I do it, but man, it rattles me. And the main fear is that people won't like me and they will reject me like my mother did. So it reinforces those feelings of abandonment. Get this, Jinx, he performs in Singapore. And I thought Singapore was like a very sort of English type place, rockin' place in Southeast Asia. It is and it isn't. Singapore censors. They do public canings. I remember that part. But as we're talking, Jinx says, oh yeah, if I do a show here, you don't talk about the country's religion or the government. Like, they will fuck you up if something is said that they don't like. It's very similar by the sounds of it to mainland China, where, you know, if you get up there and say, hey, or you're in Myanmar, formerly Burma, and you say, you know, the generals that run this place, the dictators, I saw them out back here before the show, and I saw a couple of them banging a goat. Like that would be the last joke you ever tell. That is what Jinx tells us. Like, you can basically say stuff, but just don't talk about the government. Don't do anything political. And that's my understanding of how it works in China. Like, you know, talk about your girlfriend fucking you over on stage, but don't say, you know, Chairman Mao, what was with that haircut? Like, just let it grow, Mao. Like, you know, go hippie. You know, let it come down to the shoulders. Chairman Mao with sort of like Bruce Lee hair. You know, put on the Elvis shades. Chairman Mao, you don't want to do that. Not even in Singapore. They will take you out and cane you. And this isn't like, oh, tap, tap. This is one serious, possibly deadly spanking. It's a flogging in public. Jinx explains this where if they say, okay, Troy Wilde, you told the joke about the guys, the generals, banging a goat, 20 lashes. One of them, he says one lash from the cane can seriously fuck you up where you don't sit for a few days. So they may cane you, hey, Troy Wilde, we're going to give you 3 lashes on Monday and then 10 more on Tuesday. And then a week from Tuesday, we'll finish it up because you need time to heal. This is serious stuff for just telling jokes, but about the wrong people. When you listen to this interview, you truly understand how blessed we are in the United States, Canada, the UK, Australia, New Zealand, places like that where speech, Western Europe, where speech is truly free. Because if you say the wrong thing in Singapore, of all places, which I thought was kind of like the Vegas of Southeast Asia, your ass will get it. No joke. So that's coming up in just a couple minutes. Jinx did the interview at 11 p.m. his time in Singapore, 8 a.m. here in Phoenix, where I'm at. There's 15 hours difference. So I'm like, hey, I just had my coffee. And Jinx is like, yeah, man, I'm tired. We're at opposite ends of the sleep spectrum during the interview. This week, meanwhile, folks, I continue my efforts to write jokes. Coming from radio, everything is spontaneous. It's said, it's done. Comedy, a lot of comics, they write jokes, they test those jokes, they perfect those jokes, and they become what comics call killer material. They never fail in any room. It's kind of like product development in any sort of corporation, like GM tests a car, then sells it in one market, and then it goes national, and it's a big hit car, and it becomes like a permanent model. That's how some comics treat their material. Radio, it's kind of like you said something that was sort of funny, maybe not funny in the moment, never really think about it again. So I'm trying to transition into writing jokes. So this week, I wrote one joke because I am fundamentally lazy. I'm glad that I did one because the week before, I don't think I did any. This one, I wrote and put up on Facebook, social media. No one said anything. That could be because they don't like me. I think 4,000 people I know on Facebook, I don't think they like me. The joke's not funny, or it's extremely insensitive and crude. So here we go. Here's the joke. This week, Soundgarden frontman Chris Cornell died from a reported suicide following a Soundgarden concert in Detroit. Soundgarden is considered a pioneer grunge band predating Nirvana and Pearl Jam. Here's my thought. If I had to travel the country singing Soundgarden songs every night, I'd kill myself too. Chris Cornell dead from a reported suicide. Guy's like 50 years old. I remember a defining moment. I was 19 years old in a nightclub in Winnipeg, Canada. This would have been like the summer of 90, late 90, early 91. And literally, I remember the music. They played Warrant, Cherry Pie, Bon Jovi, I'll Be There For You. I think that's these 5 words, I swear. That one, I swear to you, right? So it was just like hair rock, hair bands, right? And then they went into, boom, Teen Spirit. And it's like the whole room just stopped. Because it was the first time anybody in that room had heard Teen Spirit. Like the thing had just debuted and was killing on radio. Nirvana, Teen Spirit, And like in that moment, I imagine it was something earlier, when the first time people heard Elvis or the Stones or Zeppelin or whoever the fuck it was in the 70s. I don't know. Cher, who's big in the 70s, right? It just changed everything. And you knew it. And these guys were called geniuses, and their music was good. Were they geniuses? Maybe, I don't know. I didn't think so. They definitely was like the new era of sound and music, the Seattle grunge thing. My whole thought, seeing Kurt Cobain and Courtney Love take a fucking shower. Seriously, take a shower. Your music is secondary to the fact with me, I shower daily, sometimes twice a day because I work out. You look like you smell. And when you look like you smell, I don't care if you're fucking Elvis, man. Take a shower. Are you a genius? So I'm a genius. I'm so intelligent, I forgot to shower. My social skills are so minimal because my musical genius is so huge. I forgot to shower for like 3 years. Take a shower and write a happy fucking song that doesn't make me want to kill myself. Like your music already makes me want to kill myself. And then I see you haven't had a shower in like 100 days. That doesn't do anything to counter the desire for me to want to shoot myself in the face. So Chris Cornell, maybe 30 years of singing fucking grunge music, he finally had it. Like, that's all I can take. It might be too soon for that type of thing, but you know. All right, ladies and gentlemen, here we go with episode 21 of Troy Wilde Interviews. Our good friend Jinx Yeo at JINXYEO.com joining us from Singapore, baby.
Hey, Troy.
Hi, Jinx. How are you?
Hey, good. You?
I am doing well. What time is it in Singapore?
11 p.m.
Thank you for doing this so late. We are recording. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure. No problem.
And Singapore, explain to us exactly where Singapore is in the world.
Singapore is in the Southeast Asia. I think a lot of people probably familiar with Malaysia, the peninsula of Malaysia, and Singapore is just at the southern tip of that peninsula.
And are you born and raised there?
Yeah, I was born and raised in Singapore.
Was that a good childhood? Do you like it there? Did you like being raised there, growing up there?
Well, it's always like pros and cons, right? In Singapore, I guess it's a very the childhood here is very at least in my family we're very and my schooling environment we're very focused on academics. So I spent a lot of my childhood like studying and all that stuff, and yeah, but I guess it's I wouldn't complain about it, you know.
At what point did you get into comedy?
I got into comedy, that was about 6 years ago. So at that point, I had dropped out of college and was working in Singapore for a few years, and then I just a friend brought me to an open mic, and then that's where I found out about the comedy scene in Singapore.
And what was your family's reaction when you dropped out of school and said, "Hey, I'm going to go try comedy"?
Oh, that was years apart. So I didn't drop out of school to try comedy. I dropped out of school for different reasons. I dropped out of school because I realized it wasn't really what I wanted to do with my life. You know, like a very academic life. It wasn't really what I wanted to pursue. So I dropped out of it, and it was only a few years later that I started doing comedy. So I didn't drop out of school because of comedy.
And tell us about the type of comedy you do, your material.
My material, I don't know if I know how to classify it. I guess I just, whatever's funny to me, you know. So sometimes I do some observational stuff. Sometimes I do some self-deprecating or some like absurd, you know, like slightly surreal stuff. I guess it's quite eclectic. I think I would describe my comedy as just whatever's funny to me.
And Singapore is sort of a major international rock star, I guess, city, state. Is there a pretty good opportunity there to make it as a comic, to earn a living as a comic in Singapore itself?
I would say the opportunities right now are relatively limited if you compare it to countries like, let's say, the US or the UK or even Australia and New Zealand. Part of the reason is because the comedy scene here is still quite new. Singapore, we have a very long tradition of like censorship, you know. So there was a time when you couldn't like just to stand up on stage and speak with a mic. You needed a permit from the government, and even nowadays, for some of our performances, depending on the venue, we still need a license from the government. go ahead with the performance. It's been a very Singapore has always been a very kind of like a censored country, in terms of public performances, and it's only in recent years they started to loosen up a little bit, and so the comedy scene in Singapore is still quite new. There's still very little comedy on TV, just because everything that's on TV has to go through lots of censorship and all that. And so the comedy on TV is pretty limited. It's mostly TV comedies, scripts and all that. And there's very little stand-up on TV. The opportunities in Singapore, I say it's still quite limited, but I hope it'll loosen up in the coming years.
So if I come to Singapore and get on stage and say, hey, the government here sucks, they may beat the shit out of me, or that you may never see me again, huh?
It's possible. I would say it depends. If somebody takes a video of it and put it up on Facebook or something like that, and then there's a big public uproar over it, then yeah. But if hopefully nobody records it and stays within that small room, and then if that's the case, probably won't happen. But it's a case of I guess not attracting too much attention, I guess. Not drawing too much heat on yourself when you're performing.
I know you performed not too long ago at the Melbourne International Comedy Festival there in Australia. So I'm assuming you travel and get out of Singapore for the very reason of censorship, and that you can make a living a whole lot easier maybe in Australia or the UK?
Oh, that's part of the reason. It's part of the reason. It's not the entire reason. I also travel because I like to perform in different countries and see how my material works at different audiences, different cultures, and all that. And it helps me grow as a comedian to be able to handle different kinds of crowds and all that. But yeah, part of the reason is because there are certain stuff that I can do in Singapore, and it might not I found some of my jokes, they work better overseas than in Singapore, just because. Not necessarily because of the censorship or not necessarily because I'll get arrested or anything like that, but because stand-up comedy is still something very new in Singapore. I guess the audiences, they're less mature and they might not get those jokes, whereas in other countries where they have a more developed comedy scene, the audiences would get those jokes better.
So playing Singapore might be equivalent in the United States of playing like a major church or something. You just basically kind of have to watch what you say and plan your jokes carefully because the audience is pretty conservative.
Yeah, I would say that. Not necessarily conservative. The crowds that come out to comedy shows, they are, I guess they're more on the liberal side because, they self-select, right? The fact that they pay to come to see a comedy show probably means that they're not so easily offended. But even then, because they have less exposure to comedy, some of the references they don't quite get, and there's a narrow range of jokes that that they really get. Some of the stuff they might have to think a bit more to get the joke, and because of that, it doesn't work that well.
See, I had no idea. I thought that Singapore was kind of like just a swinging free good time, kind of like the Vegas of Southeast Asia. But man, they're putting a damper on your good time with that censorship.
Oh yeah, it is. I guess it's a bit kind of like if Vegas was run by a very authoritarian government. I guess I don't know how to describe it.
Yeah, I'd be like, hey, don't stop that gambling. No more gambling, and you put your clothes back on, and put your clothes back on.
Yeah, kind of like that. Yeah.
Well, that must get old, man. Because does it kind of feel like, does it depress you? Because you perform in a very free, uncensored environment in Australia or the United Kingdom and other places. Then you go back to Singapore. That must be kind of depressing in some way, because it's like you have to put on a bit of a metaphorical straitjacket.
Well, it's not that bad, because like I said, the people who come to the comedy club, they come to comedy shows, they tend to skew more liberal on this, and so they are not the ones that are easily offended or anything like that. But it's just that there's always this risk where, you say something controversial and somebody secretly takes a recording of it and puts it puts it on social media and people take it out of context and there's a big uproar over it, there's always this risk like hanging over you. So far, it hasn't happened yet, so I wouldn't say it's really. I wouldn't say it's like that big of an issue, but just because it's hanging over you, I guess it constrains me a little bit, but I wouldn't call it a straitjacket. Maybe more like I don't know, just like maybe some clothes that are a bit too tight.
And I'm looking at your calendar on your website. So you perform in Hong Kong, in Jakarta, in Indonesia, in Kuala Lumpur, just across the border from you, I guess. And then you have Edinburgh Fringe coming up. That's about the biggest comedy festival or arts festival in the world, isn't it?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, Edinburgh Fringe. Yeah.
Explain to our listeners, when you go to these comedy festivals, because they can be a month long and you perform a bunch of shows, how do you make money there?
Well, it depends on the festival. Like, for example, in Perth and Adelaide, I produced I recently did the Perth Fringe Bowl and the Adelaide Fringe, and over there I had to produce my own shows. So basically, I pay my own way, I pay my own travel expenses and accommodation. I rent a venue, and then I make money from ticket sales. So that's how I do it in Perth and Adelaide. In Melbourne, this time I was very fortunate to be sponsored by the festival, so they flew me over to Melbourne and they sponsored my accommodation, and I just did shows for them for the whole month in Melbourne. And so that one, I don't get paid a lot, but it's good because they have no risk. They paid all my expenses. In Edinburgh, I'm also producing my own shows, but in Edinburgh the model is slightly different because I'm doing what they call the free festival. That is where in Edinburgh typically, in order to do a show, you have to rent a festival, which costs like rent a venue, which costs like thousands of pounds. What the free festival does is they give you the venue for free, so you don't have to rent the venue, but you also have to let your audiences in for free, which means you let the audiences in for free, and then at the end of the show you make a pitch to them and you tell them, hey, this is a free show, but I have to cover my travel expenses and all that, so it would really help if you I'll be holding a bucket at the door at the end of the show, and then it really helps if you just throw in some change, whatever you think the show was worth to you, and so it's kind of like basking indoor. That's how it's described.
So I get it. Yeah. So in Australia, in Melbourne, you're basically setting up your own comedy club for a month and selling tickets to your own show, where there's a huge audience at the comedy festival. Then in Edinburgh, you're doing the same thing. You're setting up your own comedy club, paying for the venue, but then you're asking for tips. You're working for tips. Yes,
that's a pretty succinct way to put it. Yeah, it's kind of like that.
Do you usually make out okay or break even, sometimes lose? Does it just depend on the venue itself or the comedy festival itself?
It depends on many factors, I guess. Last year was the first time I did all these festivals, and I kind of lost a bit of money. I think because I didn't get that. There's so many factors. I didn't understand all the factors that goes into having a profitable run. For example, in Perth, I had a band in Perth and Adelaide when I did it last year. I didn't. The time slots they gave me didn't include the weekend, and that was a very bad decision on my part because the weekend is where most of the crowds come out. So I just had to make do with like the weekday crowds, which are always usually smaller and all that. So it was a bit tougher to cover my costs. I think I kind of broke even, or maybe lost a bit of money in there. And in Edinburgh, I guess I did okay for my first time, I guess. So I also like got close to breaking even or something like that. So, but overall, I lost a bit of money at this festival. Just because it was my first time, nobody knew me over there, and I didn't know all the factors that go into making a show profitable. But I think this year, so far, it's been better. I think I made a bit of money in Perth and a bit of money in Adelaide. So part of the reason is because this time I knew I had to fight for the weekend spot, and also another reason is because some people saw me last year, they liked the show, then they came back this year. So I have a little bit of following in these cities now, so that helps as well.
And your tour this year, you're calling your act The Abnormal Asian. Can you tell us a little bit about the content?
The content, a lot of these festival shows, they have like a theme to it, and they write the whole show around a theme, but that's not what I do, actually. For this show, Abnormal Asian, it's basically just, there's no single theme or anything. It's basically like a stand-up show for 1 hour. I just 1 hour of stand-up comedy, and it's whatever. It's all the new stuff, basically, that I've been working on for the past year. So I did a 1 hour show last year, and this year is a totally different show, but there's no particular theme to it. I just do stand up for an hour.
Like, I'm looking at a video of you, and it's tagged as "Don't Skip the Sex Talk." What is that about?
All right, that one is about I tell a story about how it was there's this like miscommunication between me and my mom, because she basically she was it's hard to describe the joke. It's hard to describe the joke. They should, if any of your listeners want to watch it, they can probably look it up on Facebook or YouTube. The videos on Facebook or YouTube. It's basically like how my mom was talking to me about sex, and I thought she was talking about something else. So it was there's this miscommunication, and the conversation, like this cross communication, where she thinks I'm talking about something, I think she's talking about something else, and yeah, that's what the joke is about.
In this country, a lot of comics they do a lot of material centered on relationships with their mothers and their fathers. In a lot of cases, they're not very good relationships. For me, example, my mother abandoned me with her love. And I've seen my mother maybe twice in 20 years. So I talk about that a fair bit, and I'm okay with it. But I think that's a major factor for some reason that comics have in common in the U.S. And I'm assuming that's sort of a universal concept. Are your family relationships, would you describe them as healthy?
Everyone has their issues with their family. I mean, they've had their issues with their family, and then, hopefully they make peace with it. Me and my parents, we have a very good relationship right now, very healthy relationship right now. And although, I do talk about some of the, parents there's always this gap between what your parents want you to do and what you yourself want to do. There's always this gap between the expectations and your own aspirations. And so I do talk about that in my comedy quite a bit. So.
Are there some influences you can tell us about comedically, people who have had a major impact on you and your comedy?
Influences, if you're talking about some of my favorite comedians, I guess I quite like George Carlin and Doug Stanhope, and although when I look at my comedy, it turns out it's nothing like theirs. I really like watching their comedy, but my comedy isn't exactly like theirs. So I guess I don't know if you can say they influenced me or anything like that. It's just, and I do have I was very fortunate that when I was starting out, I did have a quite an experienced comedian who was living in Singapore at that time, and he kind of mentored me. His name is Jonathan Atherton, and a lot of comedians in Asia, we were like helped by him in some way. So I was very fortunate to have him as a mentor in my early days. So I guess he was a big influence on me as well.
And Jinx, can you tell us all the countries where you've performed?
That would be a pretty long list. I might miss out some countries. I think I performed in about 17 countries or so. A lot of Asian countries, like for example, Hong Kong, Philippines, Myanmar, Vietnam, Indonesia, Malaysia, India, Sri Lanka, and a whole bunch of Asian countries, and overseas and outside of Asia, I perform in Australia, New Zealand, Germany, the UK, and Netherlands. Yeah.
Now, when you perform in Asia, is your act English language?
It's always English language. So far, I've only performed in English.
Singapore, they speak English in Singapore, right?
Yeah, Singapore is the main language in Singapore. That most of our affairs are conducted in English. That's the standardized language in Singapore.
Early in the interview, we talked about Singapore and censorship or whatever for comedians. What are the best parts of living in Singapore? Tell us about the upside to Singapore.
Well, Singapore is a very, it's a very safe country to live in, and Singapore is. I would say we're fortunate that things seem to be pretty well run in Singapore. I guess being a small country is generally easier to run. So, and because of that, it's a small country. You don't have to spend a lot of time in traveling because the country is small. So transportation-wise, that's sometimes when I go to other countries, you have to travel like a long time to go to a gig. But that's not the case in Singapore.
So when you perform, like you said, Vietnam and Myanmar, which is formerly Burma, which was sort of occupied by dictators and generals, how do you get into those countries? I mean, is it difficult to play there? Do you have to watch what you're saying in some of those places too?
Yes. In those countries, usually in those countries, the promoters will tell you what you can't talk about. And you generally in those countries like Vietnam or Myanmar, you don't talk about religion. Especially not their national religion, and you don't talk about their government, and that's about it. But usually I don't have much jokes about their government anyway. So, I just stay away from their religion.
So if I'm playing Myanmar or what is formerly Burma tonight, and I drop a couple of F-bombs, I'll probably be okay. But if I start talking shit about the government, I'm probably going to get taken out back and shot in the head or something.
It could happen, and yeah, I haven't tried it, so I don't know what will actually happen, but I'm not keen to find out.
How about you try it and you get back to us, and then maybe I'll go give it a shot.
I don't know. I might have to take out insurance policy for that.
Yeah. No, I hear you. To me, you have a lot of balls and courage just saying, I'm going to go to Myanmar. If people don't know the history of that country, it was featured in, I think, the last Rambo movie, Burma. That's a rough place, man. Just to say, I'm going to go in there and do stand-up, or even Hong Kong, which is, let's face it, China runs that place, so their laws are there by extension, their culture. And that's pretty gutsy of you, my friend.
Yeah, Hong Kong. Surprisingly, Hong Kong is actually one of the places where I perform where I have the least amount of restrictions on what I could say. In China, in mainland China, I guess they're more restrictive, but in Hong Kong, I guess. At least for now, they're still pretty liberal about what you can say on stage. Have
you played mainland China?
I have as well. Yeah, I have as well. And there was once I was just commenting on. They tell me don't say anything about the government and all that. And there's once I was just commenting on the news article, and it wasn't even really about the government. It was slightly related, and the promoter got a bit on edge about it and say, "Oh, can you not do that joke again?" So. I guess in China, we really have to watch what we say. But in Hong Kong, so far, from my experience, it's still all right.
So when you play China, are the audiences pretty big?
I guess it varies. It depends. I've performed to some big audiences in China and some smaller ones as well. Yeah, but the audiences in China, they're mostly expats. I think maybe because the locals in China, their English isn't that well. They don't speak English that well, and so mostly it's the expats that come to the comedy show.
I got you, man. So if you're playing mainland China and you got an idea to do a joke about like Chairman Mao's haircut, you probably want to keep that one to yourself.
Oh yeah.
And what is your long-term goal for comedy? What will you call success in 5 years or 10 years?
Success in 5 years or 10 years. I guess I want to build up a following in many different countries, so that I can tour. I hope if every year I could do a world tour and bring a new show to these different countries every year, and I could sell out those shows. I'll be pretty happy about that. So I guess it's about building up my following in these various countries. I like to travel, so it would be nice if I could do this comedy tour every year, bring a new show to these countries every year, and kind of get paid to travel to these countries.
I have a couple follow-up questions I meant to ask earlier. Your name, Jinx, Jinx. Every time that you and I have been communicating on Facebook, I laugh because I say, "Hi, Jinx." Where does that come from?
It comes from my Chinese name. My Chinese name is Jinx Yeo. So my friends, they've always called me Jinx, and so when I started doing comedy, I just used that as my stage name.
In Singapore, do they speak Cantonese and Mandarin? Are those the languages, or what are the major Asian dialects there?
Well, Singapore is a very multi-racial country, so we have like the main racial groups in Singapore are the Chinese, the Malays, and the Indians, and then so the Chinese people we speak. In school, we are taught Mandarin, but a lot of Chinese people in their families, they speak their respective dialects as well. So some of them might speak Hokkien or Cantonese or Teochew or Hakka. There's a lot of different dialects, but in school we learn the standardized language that we learn for Chinese people is Mandarin. And the Malays, they speak Malay, and the Indians, they speak either Tamil or Hindi. So. But English is the main administrative language in Singapore, although our national language technically is Malay.
And if I'm right, Mandarin and Canton are major provinces within China, and you said that you speak and understand Mandarin. Could you speak or communicate with somebody who speaks Cantonese?
No, I don't. I know just a few words in Cantonese, just because they're on TV and all that, but I mean, not even on TV. Like I watch them in Hong Kong. Sometimes I watch Hong Kong shows and I read the subtitles and all that stuff. So I don't really understand Hong Kong. I don't really understand Cantonese. Mainly I speak Mandarin.
Many years ago, I recall an American guy, some young kid, 19, 20 years old. This is probably 20 years ago now. He did something. I don't know if he littered or he did something in Singapore, and they gave him a public caning.
Yeah, I think that was. If I remember correctly, it was graffiti. I think he did some graffiti in Singapore, and because of that, he was caned. Yeah.
Is that still part of the thing over there? If you get out of line, they'll cane you.
Yeah, for some offenses, yeah. They do that in Singapore.
And that's basically one badass spanking, right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I haven't experienced it, and hopefully I never will. But yeah, it's pretty harsh, you know.
If you go on stage and say something about the government, or anybody does, comedy or otherwise, you might be up for a caning.
Well, I don't know. See, I don't actually know what crimes they cane people for. It depends, you know. I guess it depends on how they want to. Yes. Yeah. I don't really know what, if I could get caned just for saying something on stage. Yeah, I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure what the maximum penalties are for those crimes. I guess it depends on what they charge you for.
And like when you get caned, it's just not once or twice. They beat the shit out of you.
Yeah, that's what I heard. You know, like I the cane I heard is a pretty big cane, and just one stroke of the cane that's really like very painful. You might not be able to sit for a few days, you know, and then they might give you a few strokes of the cane. So from what I heard, they might not even finish the caning in one session, you know, just because the cane is like a pretty huge cane, and just one stroke is enough to probably incapacitate you for a few days, not being able to sit and all that.
We mentioned Las Vegas earlier in the interview, and people here in this country in Las Vegas, they might pay a couple grand for something like that. Some people are into that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Jinx Yeo, Y-E-O, Jinxyeo is Jinx's website. You can check out his touring calendar. He's all over Asia. He's going to be at the Edinburgh Fringe later this summer, the largest comedy and arts festival in the world. So your opportunities to see Jinx are ongoing. Check him out. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode 21. Shows into Troy Wilde Interviews, the broadcast quality podcast dedicated to interviewing comedians, comics, whatever you want to call funny people in the U.S. and all over the world. We are available for downloading. Download me on Apple Podcasts. That's just iTunes. They're calling it Apple Podcast now. Stitcher Radio, Google Play, YouTube, and our website at Troy Wilde Interviews. The best thing that you can do for me, something that would be extremely helpful, if you think it's worth the damage to your reputation and possible family relationships, to endorse us by sharing us, I appreciate you doing that to yourself. If you can share on social media, that would be super. Share me, and it would be much, much appreciated. Thank you for listening. Have an awesome day, an awesome week, an awesome month, an awesome year, decade, century, millennium, and life. I love you.